Okay, welcome to Leave Us Alone, the podcast that champions individual liberty and limited government. I'm Grover Norquist, and today we're going to be discussing the government shutdown and whether it's going to open up soon, never, what the compromises are or aren't. If you're new here, this show is about one simple idea. Government should stay out of our lives as much as possible. Our coalition includes everybody who simply wishes to be left alone: taxpayers, gun owners, homeschoolers, independent contractors, everybody who wants the government to back off and let them lead their lives. Today, we're joined by Mike. We're going to be discussing
the Schumer shutdown.
Schumer shutdown. Very good. That's an improvement.
So we are on day 9 of a government shutdown here, and Democrats seem relatively entrenched in their position. And I think that's because, as we've discussed here before, their political factors haven't changed. They are still trying to prove to their most activist online part of the progressive base that they're willing to fight Trump at any cost. So I think digging in is the purpose here. And I think they've put themselves in a box where it's not really likely that they're going to be able to deliver a win or demonstrate any real concession that they've gained to their base. Their demands are still the $1.5 trillion increase in spending, focus on reform, on repealing Trump's signature legislation, the One Big Beautiful Bill, and undoing the Medicaid reforms in there. And then they want a permanent extension of the increased Obamacare subsidies that were done as temporary COVID policy that they now want a Republican Congress and president to make permanent for them. These are things Republicans are not going to budge on. And I think Democrats remain stuck in this position until they ultimately are going to cave at some point.
This is different, and we've lived through a number of these. You go back to 1980, we didn't do shutdowns before 1980. The government would run out of money. They'd say, we know in the next several days or the next couple of weeks, we're going to work this out. So here's what we'll do. Stay in your job, keep coming to work. We will keep paying you, and it'll work out. And it did. Then in 1980, when Carter was president, his guys said, no, this isn't legal. And I don't know whether they actually had this sense of this really isn't legal, or whether they thought it advantages the president to take the position that you have to have a shutdown in order to help Carter win re-election, perhaps. Whatever it was, must be somewhat true, because everybody continued that policy of saying, when you have a shutdown, you send people home, you don't pay them until you get a final deal. Then the people who stayed at home for days, weeks, more than a month, then they get paid for time they never worked, which always struck me as kind of goofy. The people would go, oh, shut the government down, what a great idea. As if they thought money was being saved. Money wasn't being saved. No money was being saved to do that. So now, and then you had the situation when the Republicans started winning control of Congress. The Democrats would deliberately shut down the government and blame the Republicans. Clinton vetoed the Republican budget in 95, the first time the Republicans had House and Senate. And the Republicans had passed the bill in the House. They'd passed the bill in the Senate. They'd gone through the relevant committees. The Democrats had participated in all this, but lost because they're in the minority. And Clinton had never put together a budget. Almost, I think every president in the history of the world has put a budget together. Clinton didn't. And he vetoes the Republican budget. Headlines on the 3 major networks: Republicans close government. And for years, they've been able to maintain that. And the press would scream, Republicans just closed the government down, even if the Democrats were the ones who had clearly poked a hole in the process. This time, the public isn't buying that. Somehow they are aware, because of, I don't know, you can see it on YouTube, that Schumer 7 months ago was saying, don't shut it down. It would give Trump all the power, acknowledging that the Democrats voting against the Republican continuation would be the Democrats shutting it down, something they always wanted to insist was the Republicans' fault. So this time around, for 7 months, they said, we're not going to shut it down. Then just a few days ago, they said, we are shutting it down. And yet they were hoping the press would still defend them and say, well, the Republicans did this, even though the Republicans keep putting on the floor of the Senate let's do a continuing resolution. Let's open the government up. Let's not shut the government down. And the Democrats, with a few defectors, almost all vote to keep it shut. And the Republicans, except for the guy from Kentucky, all vote to open it. So they're not able to sell. If the plan was blame the Republicans, the press will help us, it's not working this time.
And there is always that blame game, but I think it gets more difficult to make that argument when it's pretty obvious that you're the one shutting it down. And I think Democrats are, one, making this slow transition. To me, it's the same thing they do when we talk about a gas stove ban that they're trying to move through the states, where it starts off when Republicans point it out, they go, whoa, we're not trying to ban gas stoves. And then the case is made of how they are doing exactly that. And then within a week, the coverage goes to, well, of course we're trying to ban gas stoves, and that's a good thing. So I think Democrats are in a shift from right now from we're not the ones shutting down the government to, oh, we actually are the ones shutting down the government, and it's a good thing. It's over your health care. And so I think we're seeing that switch take place right now, and that's because their position's not really defensible, where it's, you already have 3 Democrat defectors in the Senate who have joined to vote for the Republican bill. Only need 5 more. You have House Republicans have passed their government funding bill. Their job is done. They've sent us to the Senate. They're waiting for action in the Senate. They haven't been here in 2 weeks because there's nothing for them to do. They passed their bill. So when there's a bill passed, when your own team is breaking from you, it gets pretty hard to build the other teams. That's why you're seeing that shift to now they're starting to argue why they're right to shut the government down.
Well, there was also this sense that we have to do something. And for 7 months, in their view, of the more left of center part of the party, which is increasingly a larger and larger share of the modern Democratic Party, they felt they wanted to see their leadership do something. Now, there isn't anything the leadership could do to force the issue to win. That they don't have the presidency. They don't have the courts that'll tell everybody what to do. They don't have the House. They don't have the Senate. They can't make anybody do anything. But they wanted to do something big. And there's a line or a scene towards the end of Animal House where all the kids, all the young men at their fraternity got thrown out of school, expelled, and they were going to close down the fraternity. And so it was all over. And somebody got up and said, now's the time to do some truly futile and stupid move, recognizing that it wasn't going to affect anything, but it was important to do this. And Bluto got up and said, and I'm just the guy to do it, or we're just the guys to do it. And the Democrats were doing just this. We need to do something big and bad. Will it be effective? No, you're not getting it. We have to let the world know we care, that we're trying. And they believe the people down the street from them have to see them screaming and yelling, even if it has no effect. And they're in the middle of doing that right now, screaming and yelling to no effect.
And we mentioned what they're starting to make their main circle the wagons around is the COVID boosted Obamacare subsidies that Democrats first did in 2021 as part of their $1.9 trillion allegedly emergency COVID spending bill. And Democrats did what they always do. They'd take an emergency, a crisis, and they see it as an opportunity to expand the size of government. So they expanded Obamacare, told the public this is only a temporary emergency measure. 2 years later, they came back in the Inflation Reduction Act and upped it again through the end of this year. And now I don't think the public is expecting a Republican House, Senate, and presidency to expand Obamacare, but that is the Democrat demand and allegedly why they're shutting down the government. Now, we'll detail and run through all the problems of why this is garbage, terrible policy that needs to go. But even if you completely disagree with us, those boosted Obamacare subsidies do not expire until January 1st. The bill before us right now would fund the government temporarily. It's a date change until November 21st. So the idea that these things are even lined up is insane. One, you shouldn't be taking the government hostage for a separate policy regardless. This is spending levels that Democrats have voted for 13 times before, that Chuck Schumer stood on the Senate floor just this March, same levels of spending, and said, outlined his case of why it's morally wrong to shut the government down. So it's ridiculous that this is the position that they've taken. And again, even the policy they're now circling the wagons on does not expire until the end of this year. It is a separate timeline than the government funding bill. So it's really an untenable position and one I don't expect them to be able to maintain. And then Grover, I think, got to point out too, part of the argument, I think, why obviously the media is not having the same impact it had in the past is I think you just have to do give credit to President Trump here, where I think he has that unique ability to just smash through the media. Where I've heard this idea, there's kind of the sun and the moon party, where the moon party is always responding to what the sun party is doing. Historically, Republicans have been the one responding, but clearly it's Democrats can't help themselves. They respond to every single action President Trump does. And I think his ability to break through here is unique. We saw that even this week, where if you have one Republican come out and say something squishy about the subsidies, you see Trump come out, and immediately the next day, the White House is I think, like stiffening their spines and taking a hardline position.
But over the last several days, I thought I heard some rumblings from Republicans that maybe they wanted to cave, or there was some movement to cave. And when you examine it, it turned out to be some press person claiming that some named or unnamed person had said something to that effect. And in politics, somebody can ask you 7 questions and hypothetical, what about if this, then, well, then that could, then you take the last comment by the guy and say, well, he's for this. No, that's not what happened. He was foolish enough to answer your question the 6th time with the caveats, if this happened, if that happened, then, well, then maybe you could do that. And the press was making it sound as if there was this serious movement of grown-up Republicans in the House and the Senate that wanted to do this. We're now seeing the leadership in the House and the Senate making it very clear they're either slapping down anybody who had that impure thought for a moment, or just being the louder voice saying, let me make this clear. Here's where we are. And you're not hearing, backbench Republicans going, no, I really meant I was for that, with the exception of the lady from Georgia who got slapped down by the president, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And her own statement, too, I should point out, was, I guess in a sense, if you're going to have one Republican come out and cave, the way to frame their statement shows why it's such a terrible argument. In her statement saying why she would support expanding Obamacare, her argument was essentially, I'm as hardline against Obamacare as anyone, but my own, quote, adult children will see their premiums increase and need these subsidies. Just, coming out and admitting, well, this is just for my selfish family's own benefit, I think is an astounding statement to make. But 2, it's a key argument. Healthcare premiums are going up regardless of what happens with these subsidies. We need to look at why healthcare premiums are going up. And the frustration with her statement is it outlines no solution to the problem. Great data coming out from Paragon Institute this week.
Yes, good group, Paragon.
Where they put out the last year, the average healthcare premiums, I believe for a family of 4, prior to the year of Obamacare kicking in, I believe it's just under $3,000. For this year, expected to go up to nearly $11,000. So almost quadrupling in the cost for healthcare premiums. And if you look at it, over 80% of that cost is now being carried by taxpayers, when in 2013 it wasn't. So if you look at it, just like anything, if it's education, where we looked at the Biden's student loan moratorium, or just the decades of policy we have there, the more government subsidizes something with taxpayer dollars, the more the real cost is going to go up. And that's exactly what we've seen in our healthcare system. And extending these subsidies only adds to that problem, only increases the long-term costs.
Although there's great charts which show which products and services have risen in cost the most. The ones that have risen the most are exactly the ones that get government subsidies.
I want to highlight one member who did something I think pretty great yesterday. That was Congressman Mike Lawler. He waited outside for Democrat Minority Leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries' office, and I think made a good moment of political theater where he was challenging him because the Democrat House position is that they will only accept a permanent extension of the boosted Obamacare subsidies. And Hakeem Jeffries tried to throw it in Mike Lawler's face about how he voted for the tax bill and that had somehow an issue to do with it. And Lawler just demonstrated complete knowledge of exactly what was in the bill, and I think how Republicans need to fight on this. And Hakeem Jeffries, it just looked like he was a robot who was in like a broken default mode or something. Lawler just questioning him to his face in front of 50 cameras whether or not he wanted to see the standard deduction cut in half and raise taxes on New Yorkers, and just kind of went line by line of what was in the tax bill. It was great to see. And when you see a Republican do that, you notice the Democrats have no answer because their position was to raise taxes on every income level in America.
That is quite true. And when you make the case about how good that bill was, the big, beautiful bill, because it stopped a $4 trillion tax increase from happening. Stopped a $4 trillion tax increase from happening. Explained that way, it gets wild support from the American people, which is very helpful. That is it for today's episode of Leave Us Alone. Thank you for joining us. And if you found this discussion valuable, please rate, review, and share the podcast. It helps us reach more freedom-loving listeners across the country. We'll be back next time with more discussions on how to protect your liberty. Until then, I'm Grover Norquist.